Hi there. Today we are over in North Yorkshire and we are interviewing Craig Hall of CarPro UK.
Hi Bert.
And I thought it'd be nice to have a little catch up. Craig's been in the industry for a very, very long time. When did you start getting into detailing?
2007. So it's 11 years now.
11 years. And so you were what, 12 then, or?
I would have been 17.
17, crikey. And that was that hands-on stuff, or was that from a product side?
It was when I first got my first car. I started getting kind of home level detailing. And after about a year, I started doing it part-time. And at that time I was still a chef. And then from there, I got a job for another coating manufacturer, and I went down there to be their head detailer down in Hemel. And then from there, it kind of led on to doing full-time detailing. And then I didn't start the product stuff until 4 years ago. Gotcha.
How did you cope in Hemel as a Scotsman?
Just had to keep repeating myself all day. So every time you speak to someone, you tell them it 4 times.
Yes. That's absolutely right. We will be subtitling this, so don't worry. And so when did you take on CarPro UK?
So I took on CarPro UK on the 1st of November 2013. At that time I was the CQuartz Finest detailer for Edinburgh. So it was I already knew the product range. I'd been doing I'd been in Edinburgh for about a year as the CQuartz Finest detailer. So I knew the products well, I knew the coatings. So it was a pretty natural progression just to go into the sales side. I still done detailing for a couple of months, and then we kind of closed that down and focused mainly on CarPro UK.
So you're the longest incumbent in the UK.
Yeah.
I must apologise, I've got a bit of cold at the moment, so I'm sounding very gravelly and a little bit sexy. What I was wanting to ask about really was about the coating industry, because when we talked, for example, to CarChem, they were just sort of getting in on the scene about the ceramic coatings, but really CarPro is almost defined, although they do lots of other products, things like PERLO, for example, done very well in mega tests in the past, and we're putting your leather products to test as it happens at this very moment.
I'm confident.
You're confident? Well, you've been asking me lots of questions, and I've been keeping completely tight-lipped, but they haven't done badly, from what I know. But from a ceramic point of view, that's kind of defines CarPro. CarPro is very much a ceramic specialist.
CarPro started as a company called QUARTZ, and QUARTZ done a hydrophilic coating. And it lasted for about 2 years, but they very quickly realised that hydrophilic means it doesn't bead.
Yes.
And in the UK and in the American markets, which is their main markets, people expect their protection to bead up, so they were used to waxes and stuff, and the oils make it hydrophobic. So you know a wax has started to fade off because it goes hydrophilic and it starts to sheet water instead. So when people were putting a coating on and they were finding out it was hydrophilic, they were thinking the coating doesn't work. So from there, they changed to CQuartz when they brought out their hydrophobic range. That was before we had any maintenance products at all. Back then, we used to tell people just use any non-wax shampoo and just maintain it. Eventually, the first liquid product that came out, I think, was Reload.
So all your liquid, all the ancillary products have come out as a consequence of wanting to look after the cars that are coated with your product.
So the main focus was the CQuartz range. That was CarPro at that time. We didn't use the name CarPro. We were just CQuartz. That's why Avi's website is still CQuartz.com.
A lot of the branding is just CQuartz, isn't it? Yeah.
So all the coating range, we've always stuck to the CQuartz name because it's the longest kind of name we've stood and used.
Yeah.
So the CarPro side of the business came about just to bring out a maintenance range and able to keep the coatings performing at the top of their kind of game. So even the original Iron X was called QUARTZ Iron Cut.
Right.
And it was the very first ever colour change and fallout remover.
Oh, so you're laying the claim to be the first greater bleeding fallout remover? It
was certainly the first bleeding fallout remover in the detailing scene.
Yeah.
So it's called Iron Cut, and if you think Iron X smells bad now, you should nip into Gordon Muir's. He still has the original sample of QUARTZ Iron Cut, and it could clear an entire car meet.
Oh, so it's quite useful stuff then.
It's when the party's going too hard and you want rid of everyone.
Just scatter a bit around. Yeah.
One little spray in the room.
Exactly. That's cool. And so in the market, since CarPro has been around, since you've been around, so to speak, there's been an explosion of other different ceramic options. Now, some of these are genuinely unique. They're generally developed. I mean, because CarPro's Korean, isn't it? That's what the factory is.
All bar one of our products is made in Korea. One of them is made in Japan because we don't have the technology in Korea to make that. And there's no one else this is CQuartz Finest Reserve. No one else in the world has an epoxy hybrid silica resin coating.
So an epoxy?
So it's an epoxy hybrid with silica in the epoxy particles.
Right.
So it's essentially a whole new technology to the market. So with that one, There was no one else in the world that has that. The only place that could manufacture it was in Japan, so it's the only one that's not made in Korea.
And that's your Rolls Royce one. So that's going up against things like G-Technic Ultra, for example, it's their top end one. IGL do Kenzo, which is a 2-part.
Yep.
Now, we're at Manor Classic Cars at the moment, and we've been coating a very sexy TVR Speed 12 race car with Max Car Care and Nick Fisher.
So the video of that will come out maybe in a month or so?
Yeah, well, when this video comes out, it probably will have already come out, the way things are. But the car, I mean, he's a TVR head, he's been getting very excited.
Nick's very TVR obsessed.
Yeah, we've had to restrain him a couple of times. He's asked for some time on his own with the car with the door shut, stuff like that. We don't want to go into the details, but we do have footage. Anyway, so as I say, we're at Manor Classic Cars, and there's this lovely collection of cars, including this gorgeous Alpha behind us. But we have been putting on this new CQuartz top of the range one. Yep. And one thing that was interesting is you put 2 layers on, but with, say, IGL Kenzo, you've got a base layer and then you've got a top layer. Yep. With yourself, you use 2 layers of the same stuff, and then we've been putting a relatively new product called GLISS on top of it, which is again equivalent to G-Technic Exo V3 apparently.
Yeah, so the CQuartz Finest Reserve, it is totally hydrophobic on its own. It doesn't need a coating topper. So the reason we're putting GLISS on this specific car is that GLISS offers a super slick surface, and because this specific car is going back into Lakeland Motor Museum, they're going to be dusting the car down and it's not going to be washed properly. So the slickness is going to aid in just wiping the dust away without it digging into the paintwork, so it's going to reduce the marring.
Gotcha. When you say slick, there are lots of phrases that I find detailers and manufacturers use. So that, you know, as new car shine and gloss and all of these different things. Now, some of them are fairly understandable, but slick, how would you specifically define slickness as opposed to, say, gloss?
So as opposed to gloss, the slickness is going to be in the way that the dirt or the dust slips over the surface.
Okay, so it's a frictional coefficient?
Yeah, so it's based on the friction of it. So there's if you look back to our SEMA videos, there's a really good video we've done with the bonnet where we showed you the GLISS bottle sitting on the bonnet, and it's a very low angle, it's around 6 degrees.
We will link on this video to that video.
And you can see as soon as you sit on the GLISS coated panel, it just goes.
It slides off. So really what you're saying is gloss is a visual thing, so it's about light refraction, whereas slickness is a physical property, it's a frictional property.
A really popular coating test that you'll see these days is people hitting it with a plastic lighter.
Yes, it's bizarre, and it's very difficult to tell it is a plastic lighter. You just see people aggressively going like this against cars, and I'm just thinking this is slightly sacrilegious.
So it's not something you'd ever want to do.
No.
But it's a customer's going to look at that and they'll think the coating's super hard, but that's really a test of slickness. So GLISS has absolutely no hardness in it, but if you've done that test, you notice that the lighter doesn't leave a mark. And the reason for that is that the plastic's just skipping over the surface. Okay. So we did do it a couple of times at SEMA, but we didn't video it because we don't really like the test.
No.
It's kind of...
It's quite aggressive, isn't it?
We also don't want customers to think that they should do it.
Yep.
So it's even our reload product will perform just as well in the test. So it's a case of slickness rather than the hardness of the coating.
Yes.
So when you look at a coating, you want a coating to protect the paintwork from chemical attacks, anything abrasion resistance, and a big selling point of ceramic coating is marring resistance.
Yeah, now this is a hot topic because we at PVD quite often get situations where somebody's coated a car and the customer's gone away and thinking, right, my car has now got a bulletproof layer. And in extreme situations, we have had ones that have technically had car accidents and the customer's moaning that the car is damaged as a consequence of hitting a wall when the ceramic coating should have covered it. Now they're very special customers, but even fairly normal, down-to-earth people, if they look at some of the promotion around ceramic coatings per se, get the impression, I mean, for example, the G-Tech ads, they do really cool visual adverts and stuff, but I think there's one with a lion or something standing on top of a car, and I sit there and I think, crikey, well, it'd be really difficult to put a lion on top of a car for a start, if very cool, but in terms of the amount of protection that it gives, 9H hardness, for example, or 8H or 7H, could you explain the difference between the MOHS scale and the pencil lead scale? So
a lot of people see 9H and they think it makes it as hard as diamond, because diamond's obviously 10H, and they think the only thing harder than this coating is now diamond. And in that point they're confusing the mineral hardness scale with the pencil hardness scale. So the pencil hardness scale is a test using basically an automatic machine, and you've heard of, like, in school you've used HB pencils. Yeah. You then get 1H, 2H, 3H, all the way up to 9H. So these are made by Mitsubishi, and it's a test for CLEARCOAT, and it's a test for abrasion resistance. And when they develop a new CLEARCOAT, such as PPG or any other CLEARCOAT company, other companies are available. they'll put it through the pencil test, and it has to reach a certain level to be allowed to be used for cars. And essentially all they're looking for is when they drag the pencil over it, if it marks or not. If you get a 9H certificate, it means that the 9H pencil marked it, because 9H would mark 9H.
Right.
Now the issue with these tests for coatings is that if car paint, quite typically they're used on silica discs. Now silica starts at 7H on the pencil hardness scale. On the mineral scale, silica starts around 3H. So the difference between mineral and the pencil hardness test, mineral hardness is only used for natural minerals, so your quartz, silicas, diamonds, carbon, whereas in terms of the pencil test, it's used on much softer items. So the likes of a silica disc is only going to perform to 7H on a pencil hardness test, and it reaches about 3H on the mineral hardness. So silica is a natural mineral, it's found in sand, it's found anywhere in the world kind of thing. If you pick up sand on the beach, that's essentially what's in your ceramic coating.
And that's silica SI is the unit, and then everybody says SiO2 because silica dioxide is how it
Yes, so silica dioxide is how they process the silica and able to make it into something that you can dissolve into a solvent, and then when the solvent dries off, it cross-links, creates a bond, and it creates essentially a sheet of softened silica. So when you think of a ceramic coating, people say silica is a 3H on the mineral hardness scale, but because you're basically diluting it with a solvent, even when it's bonded and fully cured, you're never even going to reach that 3H on a mineral scale. So when they do a pencil hardness test, it's typically on that silica disc already, so it's sitting at 7H. So if you then put a couple layers of coating on top of that, the slickness or the hardness is going to create a friction coefficient with the pencil. So if the pencil can skip along it, it's going to increase your H rating without actually having to increase the hardness. So the slickness does play a part in the test as well.
So what you're saying is all these figures about 9H, 10H and million H, they're actually not necessarily particularly useful in the real world.
In the real world, your car paint is never going to be 7H. Even the hardest of sort of Mercedes ceramic lacquers and stuff like that, you'd be lucky if they'll make 7H. They'll probably get between 6 and 7. Something like a Ford that's got a little bit softer paint, or especially your Japanese cars like your Subaru.
Like the good ones, yeah.
They're probably on the kind of 3 to 4H range. So if you were to put a coating on top of them, it will increase the H range, but all of ours, we tell the customer it's going to increase it by 2H. So we won't sell you a 9H coating because we could put it on a silica disc and tell you it's a 9H, but it's not going to be 9H when it goes onto your car's paintwork. So if you put it on your Subaru, you might get 4 or 5H, but if you're using a BMW, for example, it's already starting at about 5, then you'll get about 7.
So that's interesting. So the way of marketing it is instead of being a fixed number, it's a plus a fixed value, in this case 2H.
Yeah, so then you can give the customer a lot better understanding of what they're actually getting, rather than giving them a figure that they think they're getting, and then that way your customer's not disappointed when it's not getting what they were promised.
Gotcha.
So we always like to under-promise and over-deliver. So the likes of our top-range CQuartz Finest Reserve, we give a 3-year warranty on that, despite the fact that all the laboratory tests, because it was a brand new technology, you can't do a 5 to 7 year test in real world. Yeah. By that point, the technology would be defunct. So the laboratory tests that were done said there is a 5 to 7 year coating, but you can't perform a real world test in a laboratory. So we give a 3-year warranty and tell the customer it's going to last 3 years. When it lasts 4 or 5, the customer thinks, brilliant, I basically got bonus time.
But it's like you buy a Subaru, it comes with a 2-year warranty, it will last for 50 years, you're like, this is amazing.
So if we then were to sell the customer that with a 7-year warranty, because the laboratory says it will last 7 and it's gone in 5 years, it then looks bad on us because the customer thinks they told me it's a 7-year coating.
Well, also these warranties, because there are companies out there offering 7-year warranty, warranties.
So I think right now they go up to about 9 years.
9 years is
or there is a lifetime.
But it was interesting because how many people who spend that sort of money on that sort of car will keep the car for that length of time is one question.
So
how do you prove
they're often not transferable.
Yeah.
And what even warranties, when you break them down, they typically only cover manufacturing defects. And in most cases, if a coating fails, it will be down to the abrasion of the coating. If the customer isn't maintaining it properly, you can. Quite important is your pre-wash stage. You want to get all the dirt off the car before you start touching it, because if you're abrading dirt in, it's like sanding the clear coat. Eventually you're going to abrade through that coating. You've got about 30 microns of clear coat on an average car. You have about 1 to 4 microns depending on the coating you're using. So you can quite easily abrade through that. So that's when we come back to the part you were saying about people thinking the coating's bulletproof. You still need to maintain it properly. That's why we recommend at least every 6 months using IronX and TARX to decontaminate the coating, and that will just draw out any iron filings, take off any tar spots, and it will return the coating back to how it was when it was applied. That way when you're washing it, it's going to release the dirt a lot easier. Because if you're not releasing the dirt in the pre-wash stage, you're then grinding it into the surface.
Absolutely. Well, one interesting thing is you're talking about the relative thicknesses. So about 30 microns of lacquer or clear coat and about 1 to 4 microns of coating. There's a point I was talking to Dom of Dodo Juice, in fact, who says, well, the next stage, the thing is, if we get too much further in the whole development of ceramic coatings, it becomes equivalently just like putting another layer of lacquer on your car, and why not do that?
So in terms of another layer of lacquer, we can actually offer you that. We've got CarPro Immortal.
Right.
And Immortal is a self-healing clear coat. So people look at CarPro and they think it's all coatings. Immortal, they'll see Immortal and they'll think it's a self-healing coating. But Immortal is as close to a clear coat as you can get.
And that's sprayed on, isn't it? It's
sprayed on, so it is a 30 micron thickness as well. So it's sprayed on 2 layers of Immortal, and it's only available through our approved body shops. Right now, the #1 approved body shop in the UK is Nick White at SL Restoration. And if you go to Nick, he can provide Immortal. And
will you put that on top of an existing car with clear coat, or would it be when you've resprayed a car and you want to put...
It would go back on top of the existing clear coat. So essentially you've still got your clear coat there. Due to the way that clear coats work, they tend to age. So the Immortal product will last around 7 to 10 years of self-heal.
Right.
Although it's permanent, just like any other clear coat, after 7 to 10 years it'll start to harden and then it won't heal.
And what's the difference between that? Because I know, sorry, I'm bunging up again here now, so it's going to be even more nasal. The people like Infinity, this ad underneath, they have brought out self-healing clear coats. Is that related to Immortal at all?
So they're very similar. What we have that they don't is that ours will self-heal even down to freezing. So with the Infinity, you have to heat it to around 60 centigrade in order to self-heal. So you can put the car back into an oven and bake it, but ours will self-heal in real time right in front of you. So there is videos on YouTube as well of that at about 12 degrees with a brass brush, kind of swiping into it, and you'll see it just heals immediately.
Wow, that's impressive stuff. And because I know some of our guys have had Infinities into polish, and when you've got a self-healing clear coat, it gets terribly exciting if you're trying to polish that. I mean, is there a point, should you try and polish that? How does it work? If you've got swirl marks in your Infinity, do you just find a really big oven, or can you use a detailer?
So the problem with Infinity is when you heat it, it's essentially resetting the memory. So I know there's guys in the USA in the really hot climates who have had issues where they've polished an Infinity. It's been perfectly fine, looks brilliant in the unit. It goes back out, it gets heated up and the swirls reappear. And that's because it's reset to the memory, but its new memory is that it's swirled, it's got a mark in it.
That's very clever. The idea of a clear coat having a memory, I mean, it's not like a digital chip or anything, it's
so it's essentially just when it heats up, the ions are attracted to themselves again, so it basically pulls back in.
It's kind of like a facelift.
Yeah. So that's how it works, but it also has downsides of when the detailer's polishing it, it's reflowed, so it looks perfect, but then when it heats again, any marks that were too deep to repair means that it'll open back up.
Just FYI, reflow is a phrase used by detailers, and it literally means, well, how would you define, you're the best placed person here to define?
So reflowing is when you heat the lacquer and it swells. So if it's if it's just a normal lacquer and not one that self-heals, some detailers will call it bloom, some detailers will call it swell. Essentially what happens, at a point when lacquer gets too hot, it'll start to swell up. So this is a lot of detailers that have found they've heavy cut a car.
Yeah.
They'll go back in the next day and they'll find new marks that they didn't see, that they thought they had removed. And the reason for that is overnight the paint's cooled back down, it's contracted. Yeah. So then the mark becomes visible again. So at that point, when you are heavy cutting a car, you do want to try and keep the heat down below a certain point. And
that's a big thing with the long throw DAs that come in the old days. It was rotary only.
Yeah, so
rotary with wool pad can make a lot of heat.
Yes. So the certain pads, like the microfibre system and stuff, they're designed to reduce the heat, as well as the DA action. Because of the way it oscillates, it's not creating as much friction, so it's going to reduce the heat build-up. The only issue with long throw DAs is that they do cut faster than a rotary, so you could be removing more paint than you need to.
Right.
So if your micron's only kind of 2 to 3 microns, if your damage is only 2 to 3 microns deep, but that long throw DA with whatever compound you're using might remove 4 or 5, it lacks a little bit of the finesse of the rotary, and the other issue is getting up to edges. Something we noticed on the TVR Speed 12, there's so much angles, DAs tend to struggle with concave curves, so as soon as you hit a concave it just stops.
Well, I saw you using a RUPES LHR15 Mark II. Yep. You're using a AUTOBRITE Direct DAS 3, I saw at some point.
Yep, the DA3 was out. We also had the Flex 14...
P40 thing.
P14, whatever they call it, the rotary.
The rotary, yeah, as opposed to the
we had the FESTOOL RAP 150, the FESTOOL RAP 80 for the 3-inch pad, and we had the Bigfoot Duetto out as well, the 12mm DA.
So there's a lot of machines, and although I think a couple of them you had so many, partly because there are two people working on there at once, and obviously you can't just have one watching. That would be weird. But at the same time, all of these machines were used for their special skills, so to speak.
Yeah, so there is crossover between the two rotaries, but that is the only two that cross over. So the Flex PE14 and the FESTOOL RAP 150, they're almost identical machines. Comes down to the ergonomics and the customer's preference. All the other machines are completely separate. So the RAP 80 is a 3-inch rotary. So we used that for the precision of being able to get right up to the edges without having to worry about the DA3 has a 12mm throw, so you can't get right up to the edge or it's kind of missing parts. And especially on the curves of that Speed 12, it's only useful on flat panels. So that's when the rotary tends to come out, just to make sure that you're getting full correction right up to an edge.
That car looked like really hard work. I mean, certainly you would never be able to use a 21 on that because of the every single panel.
Yeah, I think if you got the 21 out, you could probably do the roof panel, and that's about it. And even that, the roof has a lip on it, so you can't get right to the edge of it, which is, we found that as soon as we started using the 15, there was about a ½ inch along this lip that we couldn't polish. So that's why the 15 didn't get too much use on this. It tends to be just the tops of the wings and the flat door. We did find that the rotary done most of the cutting work and the refining work.
One thing I noticed is, bear in mind the TVR is carbon fibre, so it's painted carbon fibre, like a Ferrari F40. If you look at the paint, you can see the texture of the carbon fibre underneath it, because obviously carbon fibre is about being light, and so you don't want to spoil that by putting tons and tons of paint on it. One thing, you had the big heat gun, so I know we used some of those in the videos, but the idea was not to use too much because of the nature of the carbon fibre. You've got to be a bit more careful using heat. Yeah,
so we use infrared thermometers just to keep an eye on the heat, because there is a point when it becomes dangerous for the paint, which are around 70 degrees. So at 70 degrees centigrade, things like filler can start to re-show. Any repairs that were done to the car can start to come through. But especially on the carbon fibre, there's a heat point where essentially you could break the bond between the paint and the gel coat, or the bare carbon. So it's one of those cars that takes a lot of experience and careful use of the shortwave infrared lamps. And
those lamps are dead clever. The one that Craig had wasn't the particular model, but you're bringing in quite soon a new model that has a built-in remote thermometer. So this is something that can monitor surface temperature without touching it, which certainly anyone with a trade has seen, because we use them on engines and stuff like that, mechanics. But it can then pulse the light to maintain a certain temperature.
Any coating on the market right now, you can cure it at 50 degrees centigrade, and it'll take about 5 to 10 minutes.
And that's full cure, so there's different types of curing, isn't there?
So that's full dry. So the curing, by any coating I've ever seen, the curing is done by UV. So what we're doing with the infrared is drying the solvent out, and essentially it's giving it a little boost to cure. But the reason that we use shortwave infrared is that shortwave is the only light wave that can pass through the silica and pass through the clear coat and the paint layer and the primer. It'll then reflect off it'll heat up the metal or the carbon in this case, and then it'll start radiating heat back out.
So you're drying it from the inside out, like how a microwave works?
Yes. So it's essentially the same way that they would have baked paint before. Modern clear coats are water-based and they tend to use cold drying, so they're not quite the same. So there is a lot of body shops that are now getting rid of their shortwave infrared lamps because it's no longer...
a bit of an opportunity for detailers.
So there is a lot of used body shop equipment, places that you can buy them from. But the shortwave then passes through, heats it from the substrate up. And what happens when you bake a coating that way is that if you are air drying the coating, it'll dry from the up to the base. So at that point, it'll skin over and there'll be solvent having to break out. So when you see you'll have seen solvent pop on a clear coat.
Yes.
So essentially you're getting that with the coating, but because it's so thin, it's not the same.
Can we just explain what solvent pop is?
So solvent pop is when the clear coat, it can either be the colour coat or the clear coat hasn't been baked properly. So the solvent's trapped underneath, the top layer skinned over, and in order for the solvents to get out, they create a tiny little, it's like a fish eye or like a little bubble in the paint, and it pops through the surface.
And you get another one, sometimes water in the airline and stuff like that, of course.
So yeah, that would be, if you get like silicone based fish eyes or water in the airline, it can create it's like a little circle at that point, rather than solvent pop looks more like someone's hit it with a pin. So it's like someone's been hitting it with a little thumbtack all over, and that's what the solvent's trying to escape, so they have to break through the upper surface. So you essentially get that with the coating, but because it's so thin, it's not quite as drastic, so it's a microscopic scale. But for that solvent to escape, it then has to break the bonds that the silica particles are forming. So it does weaken your coating very slightly.
Gotcha. So there's a difference between drying and curing, is what you're saying?
Yes, so drying is getting rid of the solvent. Curing is when the coating will become solvent resistant, chemical resistant and hard. So that is done by UV, which we did actually develop a UV lamp to fully cure a coating.
That'd be kind of cool. Can you imagine a car coming in, and once you've coated it, it goes first of all into the infrared range, and then you press a button in your unit, and then suddenly everything goes into ultraviolet.
So the issue with that is that you would have to have a completely closed off room in order to do it, because the risk of UV rays is extreme.
You just have lots of very tan details.
Yes. So we did develop the lamp for it, but we very quickly realised in testing that it's just not safe enough to do. So it'll never make market or anything like that.
That's a shame, because you can imagine how effective that would be, because a lot of the problems that we find, again with people, because if you've got a unit and you can keep the car for a week, then that's grand.
Yeah.
But quite a few people, they'll try and do this is why we say you can't do a coating in a day, but even in 2 days, if you've done all the machining day one, you do the coating maybe the night of day one, and then the customer picks up the following day, that's still not an ideal necessarily. I mean, some coatings are different, but it's ideal really to leave the car quite a decent amount of time. Yeah,
so most coatings, as soon as they're dry, they can go back to the customer. Certain coatings like our CQuartz UK, we recommend reload to be put on top while it's curing, and that just protects it from water spotting and chemicals, because CQuartz UK is going to take about 4 days. So our approved coatings, the CQuartz Professional and CQuartz Finest Reserve, they're going to become chemical resistant within 24 hours. So with them, you would bake it with the infrared lamp, it's going to dry it, it's then going to sit inside overnight, and that's going to give it 12 to 18 hours, and by that point it's almost perfectly cured.
Yeah.
And then the customer's taken away a cured coating anyway, but there is some coatings that do take 4 to 7 days. So most people tell their customer not to wash the car either for 4 days or for a week, and that's just to ensure that the coating has fully cured, because if it hasn't and you use chemicals on it, it's going to thin the layer.
So I just want to quietly wrap up here. We've been chatting away. We could talk for hours on this, but nobody will want to listen. The question I've got really is, what is the future for ceramic coatings? Where are you going to go? Do you think it's going to progress to this kind of linear format where, we started at 6H and now we're on to the 8, 9H. It starts at 1 year guarantee and then we've got people offering 7 or 9 year guarantees. Is that just going to progress, or do you think it's going to hit a boundary, hit a buffer?
So I get the feeling that there is only going to be so much of a limit that they can put on a warranty. So I don't know how much further they can push with that. In terms of the H range, there is a certain Chinese-based website that you can go on and order things direct from manufacturers. On there you will find coatings that claim to be 10, 11, 12 and 13H.
These are the ones that have been reviewed. Are these the very cheap ones that you can get through various online marketplaces?
Yes.
These, we've talked, in fact, again at CarPro we talked about those because we were looking at MSDS and the safety behind them.
Yeah.
And we have been contacted by the odd person claiming to sort of be able to dish the dirt on all these sort of things.
So the main thing with this, when you're looking at a business trying to sell you a 13H coating, is that the test for pencil hardness only goes up to 9H.
Yes.
So there's no test for 13H, so it's kind of
yeah.
awkward on how you would. How do you know it's 13H when you can't possibly test it? So at this point it seems to be just a one-upmanship of someone's done 10, I'll do 11, someone's done 11, I'll do 12.
Yeah.
In terms of the future of coatings, I believe silica's coming to the end of what they can possibly do with a processed natural mineral.
So it's all going to go TI.
So TiO2 is your titanium dioxide, so our CQuartz Professional and our CQuartz Classic, they contain TiO2. So TiO2 is good for boosting the clarity of a coating, and it then in turn boosts the gloss. But in my opinion, I can imagine that everyone is going to start moving more towards resin hybrids.
Okay.
So because the epoxy resin silica hybrid that we've got in CQuartz Finest Reserve, currently it is still the only one that is an epoxy resin hybrid, and because that's a man-made chemical, there's a lot more possibility for advancement in this area.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you start building these chemicals, they can then, as technology advances, you can then advance that coating as well. So in the next kind of 5 to 10 years, I can see silica coatings becoming less and less, because it's almost at its kind of peak of where you can take a silica coating. Essentially, everyone's using a processed silane resin, and then from that they're adding certain solvents, certain things like TiO2, and you're modifying your coating that way. So most silica coatings start with the same base ingredient, and then they're made unique by what you add to that.
So these cheap offerings could just be that base solution.
So what you tend to find in the cheap ones is that they're using the base solution the same as us, but they're using a tiny fraction of it, just enough to call it a silica coating, and then it's mostly solvent. So I think there was one that's around £9–10.
Yes.
And they found out when they started looking into it that it's about 97% solvents.
Yes, we had quite a lot of people complaining about, from a personal state, getting headaches and stuff because the solvents are so strong.
So that's the other issue, is that in certain areas of Asia, you have to wonder whether they're following the proper safety.
Guidelines,
so that is a worry. There was one of our products when the laws changed in Japan, they had to change the carrier agent because it became, the Japanese decided it wasn't safe anymore.
Yeah.
So things like that you have to keep in mind when you're dealing with products. Go for big name companies that are doing the proper testing.
Gotcha. Okay, so moving away from the ceramic side, is there anything new and exciting on the horizon at CarPro the next 12 months?
So we are constantly developing new products. At the moment we're focusing on the maintenance range as well, bringing in a few more products that fill in the gaps in our maintenance range. So at the moment we've got things like shampoo, felt removers, tar removers and stuff, but we don't have snow foams, pre-wash. We recently brought out a bug remover because it was something that customers were always asking for, is they wanted something that's coating safe to use on bugs, because quite often people use degreasers or other bug removers.
Well, bugs are actually, bug removal is quite a specific thing, isn't it?
Yes.
Is that they're acidic, or there's something quite specific about it?
So the issue when a bug hits the car is that depending on what bug it is, there'll be varying levels of pH from their bodily fluids. So it splatters on your car. It can quite quickly start to eat into the coating or the paintwork if it's uncoated. So quite often you'll see cars that don't have any protection, and you'll see that even when you remove the bugs, there's an acid mark left.
Yeah.
So the quicker you can get that off, the better. The other issue with bugs is that obviously they have a sort of exoskeleton. So you can't just wipe them away, you have to dissolve it first. Because if you just wash over it with your wash mitt and your shampoo, you'll be grinding that into the surface. So ideally what you want is something that can safely dissolve the bug and make it run off and just
all the
rinse
bony
away.
bits, all the legs, all the stingers, all the gooey bits. I mean, a big hornet has got quite a lot to it, I have to admit.
Yes. The other issue with bugs is that when your paint heats up in the sun, it'll start to expand. So if the bugs, typically they're on kind of lower areas, but the issue that we normally see with bird droppings as well is that when the paint expands, it's then got the weight of the bird dropping pushing that area down. Yeah. So sometimes when it contracts around the bird etching, you then end up with a slightly lower level of clear coat.
Yeah, that's what John Hogg was talking about. When you're doing mega
so it then affects the clear coat, so that when the bird etching is removed, the clear coat's sitting lower in that area. So traditionally you can either polish it off and you'll have to reduce all the clear coat to that level. You can get them out with heat, but you need to know the technique.
Yes.
Because you don't.
Well, that's reflow over purpose, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
So essentially by that you're just trying to swell the paint and make it re-level all one level. You do still typically have to polish a little bit out at the end of that, because you will get the acid etching from whatever the bird's been eating. The other issue with bird droppings is that they tend to eat gravel for digestion.
Right.
So when the bird dropping hits your car, it has stones in it as well.
That's not very nice.
So for that we released Eco 2, which is a waterless wash concentrate. So we recommend all our coated cars keep one of our boas and some Eco 2 and also some tissue paper. So with what we recommend is you place the tissue paper on, spray the Eco 2 onto that,
the tissue,
and that way it can sit on for a couple of minutes and soften it, because if you just spray it on and wipe it straight away, you'll wipe the gravel onto it and all the dried bird dropping. So spray that on, set it on for a few minutes, carefully lift away the tissue paper, and then wipe it, spray some more on, wipe it with the BOA, and that way you can safely remove bird droppings without having to wait until you're washing the car.
Gotcha. And a BOA, by the way, is a microfibre bit that is made by CarPro.
Yeah, so it's one of our thick plush microfibres.
Gotcha. So we've learnt many things here today. We've learnt that with ceramic coatings, they have a limited time scale in their current form, and that they'll probably all be following the route that the CQuartz Finest Reserve currently does. We've learnt that insects eat gravel to aid their... Birds do, not insects. I was about to say this. It's illness. So birds eat gravel to aid their digestion. We've learnt that you can reflow the lacquer in certain circumstances when it comes to re-leveling lacquer after bird mess and etching. So there's an awful lot going on. Craig, it's been an absolute pleasure. You are a fountain of knowledge and a gentleman to boot. It has been a pleasure having you here. And this TVR, we shall be putting shots on that soon. It looks absolutely stunning.
Yeah, it's looking good.
And I believe the whole point of doing this partially is partly to get Nick Fisher excited, but mostly to create a promotional video for CarPro. And I think it's going to be pretty stunning. We've had a drone here. We've had all sorts of other things.
Yeah, so this is our first UK-based promo. So the guys in USA have been taking all the glory for the last few years. They've got beautiful videos. If you search for things like CQuartz Finest Pagani or CQuartz Finest 488.
And we've got the TVR.
And now we've got the TVR Speed 12. So the only thing we've got that they don't is it's one of one in the world.
It is. That's something, I suppose. I think the AA man's going to be arriving soon, so we've got to dive off to that. But thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed our interview with Craig Hall of CarPro UK when we were up in York at Max Car Care with a certain sexy TVR Cerberus Speed 12 race car. If you would like to watch more, you can watch part 2 here, and if you would like to subscribe, click here.